Hey everyone, how's it going? Team here, and today I want to show you a new project that I've been working on for the past month or so. This is a project that I've had in mind for more than a decade at this stage. The first time I got the idea for it was probably 2012 or 13, when I was listening to yet another rant by Total Biscuit about how reviews or review scores specifically are actually meaningless unless you know the reviewer and know what they like and don't like, right? So at this stage I started thinking, hey, is there a way to represent the video game reviews specifically in a way where you could grasp the core of the game in a seconds, like, the same with a score, but without the score bias and sort of what it represents in terms of like knowing the reviewer, knowing what their tastes and all that jazz, right? So it took a while. Before LLMs, I attempted to do this project multiple times, and it fairly quickly became apparent that there is a whole lot of tech that is required to make this work. And 2015 16 Word to Vec happened, embeddings happened. It became a lot easier to work with textual data in sort of machine learning manner, but it still was very hard to achieve what I wanted here because you needed specific models that would do specific things to text, right? And it took a while, but we're basically got there, and modern LLMs are generic enough to allow me to just basically prompt them to do what I want. So for the last months, I've been building a little tool called VaporLens that does exactly that. It takes video game reviews and condenses them into a nice one-pager where you can quickly glance over the sort of most prevalent points in a review of a game. Specifically in this case, I take Steam reviews and then show them like this, right? So you basically get a quick overview of what the summary is, and then you get the split by categories. I think it works fairly nice, but I want to walk you through the specific details of how this works because I think this is the interesting bit. Let me open a VS Code for that, and I will walk you through how the actual processing code works. While it is loading, you can go to vaporlens.app and try it out yourself. There is also a queue that you can, add your own game or vote for a game and do things like this. What else is there? There's a details view that has a bit more information about things. I'm still trying to figure out a way to represent the importance of the points in the summary screen, because there are some, like in this case, if you look at the summary, you see that negatives, like there is negatives and like weak unfocused story, right? But that is not quite completely true because only about 30% importance, which means that only about 20% of people actually mention that. So it's not such a big problem. But yeah, I'm still like, this is very much a work in progress. So let's have a look at how the processing works and how the games are actually processed, right? The first things I do, I get sampled reviews. This was a really big problem in the beginning when I started looking at games like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii is not that big, but if we take something like DayZ or Helldivers, we go to the Steam page, you'll see that they literally have 700,000 reviews. That is, like, processing each one of those would be ridiculous. Like, you need insane amount of money to do that, even with the current very cheap costs of LLMs, right? So I had to implement sampling that would take 2000 most recent, most important reviews according to a bunch of criteria. Specifically, the criteria are the length of the review. So, shorter reviews typically are not as interesting or don't contain as much information. Second criteria is the playtime. So obviously people who play more usually have more to say about games, and those insights are deeper basically, right? And then there's also like the likes, dislikes, people who found it helpful, minus people who found it funny. So we want to sort of discard the meme reviews and all that jazz, right? So we sample the ones that are important, essentially, right? Cool thing is, because we're working with LLMs, it actually doesn't matter what language the reviews are in. So we can literally work with any of them and still get the English language points as the output of them. So there is no sort of limitation of, hey, like we're throwing out the Chinese reviews. No, 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 no. We're actually working with all of them. So once we sample that and return them, what we do next is filter. So there is Categorizer, again, LLM based, fairly straightforward, that determines the sentiment. This is what is shown over here on the page. So this is basically the review sentiments, right? So we can see which ones were negative, which ones were positive. It determines, is it helpful? And it determines, is it protest? So helpfulness is pretty clear, right? So helpfulness is, hey, does it contain actually any information that is helpful for reviewing? And protest is basically review bombing or non-constructive feedback, let's put it this way, right? So where people are angry about something that is not directly related to the game itself, it's just gonna discard it essentially. If it's completely garbage, if there is like value to it, it will go to the next step. So once the reviews are filtered, we obviously get less, so we start extracting. The extraction, again, fairly straightforward, done on the schema as well. So we got positive, negative, gameplay, performance, recommendation, and miscellaneous points, right? Fairly straightforward, nothing super fancy here. It literally takes review and extracts statements from them, right? So all positive statements go into positive, all negative statements go into negatives, and then whatever it did not go into those two categories gets sorted into 4 other by gameplay, performance, recommendations, which is, I don't know if it's a best name, but it's basically verdict statements, right? So whenever someone gives a verdict to the game that doesn't fit into positive or negative, this goes here. It can be recommendation, it can be something like, you know, I don't think this is a good idea or whatever. But yeah, and then everything else goes into MISC. There's usually some like stuff about monetization, live service, I don't know, LGBTQ community and all that jazz usually ends up over there, right? It's like minor, but I think it provides some insights. So once we've done extraction, this is where interesting things happen. So first of all, we summarize points by category. So if you have a look at the details, you will notice that each category has quite a few of those points, right? So we're talking like 5,000-6,000 positive points, 5,000-6,000 negative points. And obviously, a lot of them are going to be similar, right? So we have to summarize them into a list of points that is brief and that basically brings out the most important ones while throwing out the ones that are like mentioned once or twice, right? Because those are probably outliers and are not that important. So yeah, point summarization is tricky because you cannot just shove the whole 6,000 points into LLM and ask it to figure out the clusters. It's not really good at that. So what I do here before that is I actually do threshold clustering using cosine similarity, which basically groups them by phrases that are very similar, right? So in this case, I think threshold is like 65%. So this is what I found to work best. You get a bunch of clusters that contain phrases that are very, very close. And then those clusters is what I give to LLM and say, hey, here's the cluster number, here's the text, summarize this, and then give me the summarized points essentially, right? Then I map those to cluster sizes as well. So I want to track of how many points there were. This is how the importance score is calculated, right? And then once this is done, there is some weight computation. So this is basically using clusters to calculate absolute weight across all of them. There's deduplication. So this is an interesting one. I just added it yesterday. We had a problem with some of the games where, you know, it kind of makes sense from the semantics perspective, I guess, when you think about it, right? But it didn't make sense from the review perspective. So like this game, for example, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, it has stuff like, hey, it had like combat system is pretty good, right? And what it really meant is people were saying that it's a lot better than the first one because first one had a really clunky combat system. Problem is there is way more people saying that the combat was clunky and frustrating still, even though they improved it, right? So you had those two very contrary points in positives and negatives that were saying essentially the same thing, but, you know, contradicting each other. So I had to add the step that basically uses absolute weights to figure out which points to remove. And if a lower weighted point contradicts the higher weighted point, the lower weighted point gets thrown out, right? So which means that now we no longer have it. We just have this, combat system is improved, which doesn't mean it's good, right? It's just better than it was before, which I think it's a decent solution. We'll see how that goes. Maybe I will have to do an iteration on this. All right, so once the summaries are deduplicated, we generate the game summary. So this is fairly straightforward. You just take all the points the game has, shove them into LLM by category, say, hey, here's the points for positives, negatives, whatever, generate me a summary, right? And this summary is what you see over here. So it picks 6 most important points, tries to pick sort of balance between positives and negatives, depending on how many of those game has, obviously takes weights into account, and returns the results. And then there is this final result assembly, and then all of that is stored in the database. Yeah, that's basically how it works. There is a small FAQ over here that does go deeper into some of those things, but I think I've gone through all of that. Preceding the question about open sourcing, probably yes, but a bit later, because right now the project is a complete another mess. And, I started with it without a database. It was literally just storing stuff in files, and I had like half a gigabyte of JSON files on my drive, which worked, but didn't scale really well. So I had to add a database. For now, it's just an SQLite on that, writes SQLite into Drive, which is fine for now, but we'll see how that develops. Maybe I will have to switch to a proper database. I also have a ton of ideas, things like, because we have all of those points, we could actually do use them for game similarity, right? So you would get true semantic similarity because tags don't allow you to do that. So here you could actually generate embeddings for all of those, and then trying to find games in the similar embedding spaces, which I think would provide a decently good sort of similar games list. We'll see how that goes. I don't have enough games right now, so there's just maybe 40-30 of them to do that, but I'm getting there. There's also fun things like semantic search, right? Because we have all this text, I can actually add a search bar that would embed the question and then find games that sort of answer the question. So you could, I want the games where I can play as a pirate and destroy cities, right? And it will actually show you games that have that mentioned in them, which could be pretty cool. There's also, I also thought about this is a bit more out there, I guess, and I'm not sure how would I pay for that, because I forgot to mention the costs for this. They are fairly low. It's actually they are an FAQ over here. It's 15 cents per 1,000 reviews right now, if I remember correctly. Yes, there you go. So it's not overly expensive, and I process around 6,000 reviews per day, which is under $1, so it's not a big deal. But I was thinking, you could add a chat where you could literally ask questions about the game. Obviously, this review doesn't actually show you all the important and little details that are in reviews and that people talk about, right? It's just a high-level overview. But what if you want to know, this Avowed is set in Pillars of Eternity, and maybe you are interested more in hey, is there actually a lot of Pillar stuff? Or, or is it just briefly mentioned and it's the same world, right? And you could ask that, and the cool thing is that there's enough data for LLM to answer. The problem is that this is a, separate LLM query, so someone would have to pay for that, and I don't yet have answer on how to properly monetize that, and my cats are destroying shit, so if you hear weird sounds, that is my cat doing stuff in the background. Anyway, that's basically VaporLens. If you have any feedback, questions, ideas, or thoughts, throw them into the comments or email me directly. I will see if I stream any of the development. The problem is that I'm doing this in my free time. I, currently full-time employee, basically, right? So I don't really have time during the days anymore, unfortunately. But we'll see where all of this goes. We'll see, maybe I can do some streams on the weekend. But I will keep developing this for some time because, as I said, I have ideas. So hope you enjoyed the video. Share it if you like, all that jazz. Reach out to me if you have any cool thoughts or ideas. Or if you want to add something here, request your games in the queue. So, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching, and I see you next time. Bye.